Before his life and achievements, let's start with his personality. There is no dispute that Napoleon was ambitious, although commentators disagree on whether his ambition was mostly for his own power and glory or for the welfare of France. The one thing that historians agree on is that Napoleon was highly intelligent with an excellent memory and was a superior organizer who could work efficiently for long hours. In battle, he could rapidly dictate a series of complex commands to his subordinates, keeping in mind where major units were expected to be at each future point. He was an inspiring leader who could obtain the best from his soldiers and subordinates. Arthur Wellesley, 1st Duke of Wellington and one of Napoleon's greatest rivals, said his presence on the battlefield was worth 40,000 soldiers, which also fits the fact that in the 1814 campaign, many Allied generals refused to give battles to units that were being personally commanded by Napoleon. Most historians see Napoleon as pragmatic and a realist. He was not driven by ideology and promoted capable men irrespective of their political and social background as long as they were loyal. However, there is a consensus that once he dominated Europe, he became more intolerant of other views and surrounded himself with yes men. Towards the end of his reign, he lost his realism and ability to compromise. Now on to his life. Napoleon Bonaparte was a man whose life and legacy reshaped Europe and reverberated across the world. From his humble beginnings on the island of Corsica to his ultimate exile on the remote island of St. Helena, Napoleon's journey was one of ambition, genius, and sheer audacity. His meteoric rise, his military brilliance, his controversial reforms, and his tragic downfall are all stuff of legend. Napoleon was born in 1769 in Ajaccio, Corsica, a year after the island was transferred from Genoa to France. His family, minor nobility but far from wealthy, had little influence in their new French homeland. Despite this, Napoleon's father secured him a scholarship to study at military academies in France. At the age of 16, Napoleon graduated from the prestigious École Militaire in Paris, becoming an artillery officer. This was no small achievement for a young Corsican. His early career coincided with a period of immense upheaval in France, the French Revolution. Watch our video on the French Revolution if you haven't already. As the revolution descended into chaos, Napoleon seized his chance to shine. In 1793, at just 24 years old, he made his mark at the Siege of Toulon, recapturing the port for the revolutionary government. His reward, promotion to brigadier general. Napoleon's rapid ascent had begun. By 1796, Napoleon was given command of the army of Italy. The French army was poorly equipped, demoralized, and outnumbered, but Napoleon transformed it into a formidable force. Through a series of brilliant maneuvers, he defeated the Austrians and their Italian allies, securing key victories at battles like Lodi, Arcole, and Rivoli. These campaigns not only showcased Napoleon's military genius, but also filled French coffers with the spoils of war. Napoleon's dispatches from the front, eloquent, inspiring, and sometimes exaggerated, captivated the French public. He wasn't just a general, he was becoming a symbol of French strength and revolutionary ideals. Bonaparte returned to Paris on 5th December 1797 as a national hero. He met Tyrant, France's foreign minister, and took command of the Army of England for the planned invasion of Britain. After 2 months of planning, Bonaparte decided that France's naval strength was not yet sufficient to confront the British Royal Navy. He decided on a military expedition to seize Egypt and thereby undermine Britain's access to its trade interests in India. Bonaparte also wished to establish a French presence in the Middle East. He assured the Directory that, as soon as he had conquered Egypt, he will establish relations with the Indian princes and, together with them, attack the English in their possessions. The Directory agreed in order to secure a trade route to the Indian subcontinent. Initially, he achieved success, including a dramatic victory at the Battle of the Pyramids, but his fortunes changed with the constant presence and the threat of the British Navy under Admiral Horatio Nelson. At the Battle of the Nile, Nelson obliterated the French fleet, stranding Napoleon and his army in Egypt. Despite this setback, Napoleon's return to France in 1799 was triumphant. The country, weary of political instability, was ready for strong leadership. In a coup d'etat known as the 18th Brumaire, Napoleon overthrew the government and established the consulate, declaring himself first consul. His rise to supreme power was complete. As first consul, Napoleon introduced sweeping reforms. His legal masterpiece, the Napoleonic Code, standardized laws across France, emphasizing equality before the law, property rights, and secular governance. He also reorganized the administration, established the Bank of France, and reformed the education system. These measures stabilized a nation that had been in turmoil for a decade. Historians have variously described Bonaparte's new regime as dictatorship by plebiscite. Local and regional administration was reformed to concentrate power in the central government. Censorship was introduced, and most opposition newspapers were closed down to stifle dissent. Bonaparte believed that the best way to secure his regime was by a victorious peace. In May 1800, he led an army across the Swiss Alps into Italy, aiming to surprise the Austrian armies that had reoccupied the peninsula when Bonaparte was still in Egypt. After a difficult crossing over the Alps, the French met AMD defeated the Austrians at Marengo. But Napoleon's ambitions extended beyond domestic reforms. In 1704, he declared himself Emperor of the French, crowned in a grand ceremony at Notre Dame Cathedral. This was not merely a coronation, it was a declaration that Napoleon's power was derived from himself, not from any church or noble lineage. Napoleon's reign was defined by war. Between 1803 and 1815, he fought a series of conflicts known as the Napoleonic Wars, pitting France against a coalition of European powers. One of his greatest triumphs came in 1805 at the Battle of Austerlitz, often called the Battle of the Three Emperors. Facing a combined Russian and Austrian army, Napoleon executed a masterstroke, decisively defeating them and securing his dominance over much of Europe. But his victories were not confined to the battlefield. Napoleon redrew the map of Europe, establishing client states and placing his relatives on thrones. At its height, the Napoleonic Empire stretched from Spain to Poland, with only Britain remaining beyond his reach. Napoleon's empire, however, was built on unstable foundations. In 1808, he made a critical error by invading Spain and installing his brother Joseph as king. The Spanish people rose in rebellion, and the Peninsular War became a costly and protracted conflict. But the true turning point came in 1812 with Napoleon's invasion of Russia. Initially, the campaign seemed promising. He assembled the Grande Armée, a force of over 600,000 men, and marched into Russia. However, the Russians employed a scorched earth strategy, retreating and burning everything in their path. When Napoleon finally reached Moscow, he found the city abandoned and in flames. With winter approaching and supplies dwindling, he was forced to retreat. The harrowing journey back decimated his army. Of the 600,000 who had marched in, fewer than 100,000 returned. Following the disastrous Russian campaign, Napoleon's enemies seized their chance. A coalition of European powers united against him, and in 1814, Paris fell. Napoleon was forced to abdicate and was exiled to the island of Elba. But Napoleon was not done. In 1815, he escaped Elba and returned to France, gathering support as he marched to Paris. His return sparked what we now call the 100 Days. His final gamble ended at the Battle of Waterloo. Facing the Duke of Wellington and Prussian forces under Blucher, Napoleon suffered a decisive defeat. He was captured and exiled once more, this time to the remote island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic. Napoleon spent his final years in exile, dictating his memoirs and reflecting on his legacy. He died in 1821, but his impact on history was far from over. Napoleon's military strategies are still studied in military academies worldwide. His reforms laid the groundwork for modern legal systems, and his vision of a unified Europe foreshadowed future attempts at European integration. But perhaps most importantly, Napoleon's life is a testament to the extraordinary power of ambition. He rose from obscurity to become one of history's most iconic figures, leaving a legacy that continues to fascinate and inspire.